Hello, good day. My name is Sunday Clement. It's nice to have you join my channel today. Nowadays, more and more people are becoming aware of the fact that many of the food that we consume daily have been imported from China. Yet, this makes me wonder why would we import food from China when we have a lot of land in Nigeria. But part of it is due to the fact that most of this food imported from China are perceived to be cheaper. And that tells us something that the quality of this food might have been compromised one way or the other. It was just recently we became aware of plastic rice, and and the fact that because someone just decided to blow the whistle does not mean that some of us have not even consumed this plastic rice before now. Yeah, I'll be talking about some of the dangerous foods that we might have been consuming that are very hazardous and dangerous to our health. First on my list is apple juice, pineapple juice, orange juice, different kinds of juice that we now have in our shopping malls today. Most of these juice are industrialized, produced juice. They are not natural. We find them on our shelves with beautiful packets and packages that makes it very attractive for us to consume. But it's no longer news that China is well known to use dangerous pesticide in production of foods, including banned pesticides. Maybe some of us are not aware that some of the preservatives used for this juice are for the production of this juice are pesticide, originally pesticide, which have been banned in a lot of countries. But they find their way into Nigeria, they find their way into our market, they find their way into our shopping mall. Some of them come through the border, some are smuggled into the country. But unfortunately, because of the endemic corruption we have in this country, someone somewhere have been compromised, and we brush aside some of the hazardous implication it might have on the populace. So I would advise that we rather stick to organic fruits than consumption of this juice. And if you have to take this juice, you might probably have to have a rethink in terms of how often you consume them. That's the first thing. The second point is the second food that we consume is industrial salt. Now, there's a difference between industrial salt and table salt, but China is well known to export industrial salt as table salt. And some of these industrial salts, which are imported, are branded as table salt, are not meant for direct consumption, but they are packaged as table salt and imported and exported to various parts of the world, especially Africa. And some of these industrialized table salt find themselves in Nigeria, in our markets, and are consumed. This can lead to a lot of problems. This can lead to stroke. This can lead to heart attack. This can increase the high risk of high blood pressure and hypertension. So that is that about. So we have to be very careful the kind of table salt we consumed and where it's being imported from. Now, my next point is on seafoods. Most of the seafoods that we consume in Nigeria are being imported from China. And most of us are aware of the high pollution rates in China. The waters are polluted, the air is polluted, and you can imagine the kind of the nature of fish that will be bred under that kind of condition. Most of them have been exposed to poisonous gases, they've been exposed to industrial sewage, and eventually they are packed together and they are sold back to Africa as seafoods. We consume these things and we discover that most of them have very high in lead, they are very high in mercury, and these are carcinogenic substances that can increase our risk of eventually developing cancer in future. So if we have to take seafoods, we have to be very, very extra careful. Now another point is chicken, corned beef, and all these stuffs that we consume, which are imported from China. China has often issues with avian flu and other borne diseases as regards animals, as regards chicken, and studies have shown that most of the factories where these corned beefs are produced are not under very tidy conditions, and in fact some of them have revealed that the places where these chickens and all these animals are reared are very bad as well, very disastrous conditions, the way they are kept and all that, and these are packaged and sent to Africa. We consume these corned beefs, we consume these animal products, and eventually result into over a long time may lead to sicknesses and all sort of things. I think it's advisable to have a rethink when it comes to buying corned beef and consuming a lot of this imported chicken. My next point is imported Chinese garlic. Most garlic that we consume in Nigeria is imported from China, and studies have shown that they contain a lot of harmful pesticide as well. And the most common one is what is referred to as methyl bromide. So it's very important for us to be very careful where our garlic is imported from, because the China market is highly compromised. And studies have shown that most of the food that are being exported are not as carefully processed in terms of meeting standard human quality control compared to what is actually consumed within China itself. So we have to be very careful what we eat. Generally, I've always advised people to stay away from artificial food. They should stay away from candies, canned tomatoes, canned this and canned that. As much as possible, you can get fresh tomatoes in Nigeria. You can get fresh vegetables instead of depending on imported candies and canned that. Yeah, it makes life easy, but who knows what has been used to preserve these substances. There was a time I was sharing in one of my videos when it was discovered that tin tomatoes are actually lined by formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is a kind of chemical which we use to preserve dead bodies. So it was discovered that some factories in China actually line these tomatoes with formaldehyde in order to preserve the tomatoes before they are canned. You can imagine we consuming these canned tomatoes without knowing what exactly we consume, and these are carcinogenic substances. So we have to bear in mind that we have to be very careful what we consume. And my next point is plastic rice, and most of us are fully aware and now fully alert on the presence of plastic, on the possibility of having plastic rice in our market. It's primarily made up of raisins and potatoes. They mix these two materials and they subject them to heat, and they become hard and they are grinded into rice grains. So this is in some way some kind of food, but can imagine consuming resin, which is plastic, and this is very dangerous and highly carcinogenic. So we have to be very careful and watch out. I believe there have been a lot of social media campaign on plastic rice, so I'm sure we know how to differentiate a plastic rice from the real rice. All right, thank you very much for your time. I believe some of the information shared here has been quite helpful, and see you in my next video. Have a nice day.